This is the Puck Poolies podcast with Matt Larkin and Stephen Ellis.
Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Puck Poolies. It's Matt Larkin here with Stephen Ellis as always. Stephen, today we're going to talk about the mid-season top 300. Feels like a signpost episode, but before we do that, as always, what's the update on your team?
Well, first off, that's a lot of work you've had to put into the 300, so that is awesome. For my team, oh my, what a final day that was. The schedule is obviously going to be a little weird with the lack of games over the next little bit, but I had a good battle with the first place team. I was leading most of the week, and then on Saturday night, I think it was, I was losing, and then come Sunday morning, I needed basically 20 points in that final game. Basically, I needed my goalie in that case, Joey Decord, to play amazing. And then I needed one of my forwards, which I think actually the only player I think I had in that game was Jordan Eberle. I needed Jordan Eberle to have a great game. He had a 3-point first period, and that got me 23 points. It didn't matter what Joey Decord did. As long as Jordan Eberle didn't get scored on multiple times, I had one just off of Jordan Eberle. So just like at the World Juniors in 2009, Eberle was very helpful for me, very clutch. In my other pool, I lost by half a point on the final, basically because Joey Decord allowed a goal near the end of the game. So that one hurts, losing to the last place team. I am now last in that pool, but I'm kind of in tank mode, probably not returning next year anyways. But I like the, beating the top team in my 16 pool was huge because it is a very difficult pool to win games in. How about you? How's your pool?
Nice. It's funny that Jordan Eberle was tied to both of our fates in different ways. For me, the suspense all week was that I was winning, which I don't want to be winning. I'm trying to tank because if I make the playoffs, I get 3 keepers. If I miss, I get 4. My team's not really a true threat. So the suspense was I was winning like 9-2 in my head-to-head matchup. I was like, no, I don't want to win. That's a 9-2 victory would put me back in a playoff spot, which would literally cost me Miro Heiskanen if the season ends. I have to give away Miro Heiskanen for nothing because he'd be my 4th keeper. And then Jordan Eberle had that 3-point first period on Sunday. I'm like, oh my God, I'm winning. And then luckily my opponent pulled out some category flips and ended up beating me like by a pretty good margin. So thank God I actually took a loss, but it came down to the wire. I was winning all week. So I ended up dropping. Now I'm comfortably out of a playoff spot, which is where I want to be. I also traded up. I've never done this before. I traded up in the first round of the draft. So I traded I have the 12th overall pick, and I traded that and Vladimir Tarasenko for the 8th overall pick. So I'm doing the paperclip into a house thing, slowly but surely improving my standing for next year. But Stephen, let's move on to the pickups now, my friend.
All right, let's start off with a guy who's been very helpful for me this year when I've needed someone, especially on the weekends, and that is Charlie Coyle.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mea culpa for me. 58% available. I ignored him too long. I sort of dismissed him as an option this year. I know he was going into the season one of Boston's top 2 centers, but I was higher on Pavel Zacha. And to me, Charlie Coyle has always been just a guy. But for now, he's still in that top 6. He's centering the top power play unit. He's got 18 goals, 42 points in 49 games. That's usually what he gets in a full season. And last 17 games alone, 8 goals, 21 points. So he's really emerging as a viable fantasy center, even in a shallow format. Maybe that changes if Boston finds the assets and trades for another center. But for now, he's actually answered the bell more than I ever thought he would. So I will admit defeat. I was wrong about Charlie Coyle.
He's been valuable for me when I've picked him up in my 12-team league, so I am on board there. Looking at the complete opposite end of the standings, let's look at Troy Terry.
Troy Terry of the Anaheim Ducks, available in 61% of Yahoo leagues. I've never actually been a huge fan of him. I find him very streaky, and even though he profiles sort of like a sniper, it's not like he's shooting the puck 250 or 300 times, so he's not really a true sniper. And he doesn't hit at all. So if you're in a category league or banger league, he's not going to help you in many categories. That said, Troy Terry does have a history of going on major heaters. And when he's on one, he can carry you for short stretches. Right now, 8 goals, 19 points in his past 17 games. So I'll admit it, Troy Terry is on one of those heaters. So you do want to add him now. If he's available, ride him for a few weeks. Sometimes his heaters can last 20 games at a time, and it's worth having him at the moment.
Okay, and now we're going to look for our deep league pickup. We're going to look at Tate McRae's least favorite NHL player, Cole Sillinger. Do you understand what I just said there?
Of course I did, and I was already going to make a Tate McRae reference. Of course, she's one of the captains of the All-Star game. You have Cole Sillinger, who was her former boyfriend, I believe, and I think the song Greedy's about him, as far as I know. And he's the one getting shafted at the All-Star game, nowhere close to it. That said, Columbus, this is a tire fire organization right now. And Cole Sillinger, he does have that first-round pedigree available in 96% of leagues. He is centering the first line, the power play, the first power play unit as well. And his stats aren't popping yet. It hasn't really paid off, but the opportunity is there. Just that role alone means he should be owned in a deep league because theoretically it should lead to some points. So it's not the most ringing endorsement, but that's why this section is for the deep league recommendation. And I do think it's worth grabbing Cole Sillinger if you're in one of those types of leagues.
All right, and the WTF pickup of the week has unfortunately hurt me by my opponents picking him up in recent weeks, and that is Dallas's Thomas Harley, aka Harley Thomas.
Yes, that's right. And this is sort of the life cycle I find of some of the pickups I recommend. Early in the season, they're in the deep league section. People don't catch on. And then later in the season, I recommend the same player again in the WTF category. And that's Thomas Harley, still available in 58% of leagues. And I don't really know what people are waiting for. This is a young stud of a defenseman. He's playing great. He's got the first round pedigree. He's got 17 points in his last 20 games, 44 shots, blocking a lot of shots too. And I don't really see Miro Heiskanen coming back from injury as a major threat, considering they're playing together now. Heiskanen has moved over to the right side. So there's just every reason to add Thomas Harley. It seems like Dallas, who just over and over, they just find great players outside the top 15 or 20 of the draft. They've done it again. That director of amateur scouting, Joe McDonnell, he just doesn't miss, man. Thomas Harley's another one. So he should be owned in far more leagues than 42% of leagues right now.
Harley was a guy I was very high on as a draft prospect, Mississauga Steelheads defenseman, and just it took a bit. It took a few years of like, all right, what's he going to do? Is he going to get his opportunity? Now he's showing the promise that we knew he would be able to, and I love to see it. Now that's the end of the pickups, but what is this week's tip of the week?
Yeah, the tip of the week, I would describe it as not all hot streaks are created equal. And that's important because at the top of every one of these shows, we talk about essentially players who are on hot streaks because that's sort of why they start getting added, and often it's why I recommend them. But you have to break down the cause of every hot streak before you can understand what to do with that player. So the ones that have an explanation are the ones you should chase. Does the player have a high pedigree? So for example, Cole Sillinger, do they have a good role? That's Cole Sillinger again, Charlie Coyle. They're the earlier guys I've recommended in this show. If there's a good reason to add them, they're playing with other elite players. They're playing in the top six. They're playing on the power play. That all makes sense. And when those guys start scoring, those are the hot streaks you want to chase. Jonathan Drouin being a great example, really went off because he's playing with Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen. Of course you want to add Jonathan Drouin. But when you see someone in a marginal role suddenly exploding, that's the type of hot streak you don't want to trust. And I want to use Michael Carcone in Arizona as the case study here. Is he Carcone or Carsoni? I'm not sure. I think it's Carcone.
It's Carcone.
Yeah. He had 13 of his 15 goals this season in a 20-game span. And he did that in a bottom six role. He wasn't on special teams, had a crazy high shooting percentage. It was not going to be sustainable. And what happened? He's got one goal in his past 19 games. And you could see that coming a mile away. He wasn't actually playing that much. He wasn't playing with good players. He wasn't being given a high leverage type of role. Pucks were just going in. So when you see a hot streak, do your homework and break down the why. That's the most important question when deciding whether to add a player or add him if you want to trade him away. But that's why not every hot streak is created equal.
Yeah, it's why every time you see a fantasy, a guy that's just been on a hot streak and they've never really done it before, I'm just kind of like a little more weary on there. Now, mentioned Jonathan Drouin earlier. Like, I've picked him up, I've dropped him this year, but man, it feels like he's actually legitimately back. Like he's going to break 50 points at this current pace for the first time in quite a long time. But I don't know, how much do you buy into that? Is it just like if he's away from McKinnon, do you have any belief in him at this point?
No, I don't think as much if he's away from McKinnon, but right now, like he's just getting that time with him. And like we're seeing games where he's playing 27 minutes. That's insane. Yeah. Like they're using him for everything. And part of it is because of the injuries, but Chushkin's still out in player assistance program, right? So the opportunities aren't really going anywhere. So I'd keep riding Drouin. I have him in my own deep pool right now.
All right, so that's that for that. It's special segment time, and this is the Matt Larkin show. I stole the show at the World Juniors a couple weeks ago, but this time it's all top 300 noteworthy players. So where do you want to start?
Yes, the top 300 will be dropping on Thursday. So if you're listening to this podcast before February 1st, it'll be coming out on the Thursday. But we're previewing it with some of my hotter takes in terms of the players that I know are locked into certain spots. So first, I want to talk about the decision at number 1, which is kind of funny. It's like I'm literally at the top of the list and I'm already struggling to make a call. But I think it's actually an interesting debate. Conor McDavid versus Nathan MacKinnon at number 1. MacKinnon has earned number 1 overall player status with what he's done this year. He's an absolute horse. He shoots the puck a ton as well, just dominating the league, on pace for, I think last I checked, it was 130 or at least 130 points. But Nathan MacKinnon has missed at least 8 games in each of his previous 4 seasons. And Connor McDavid coming on strong, of course. Oilers have won 16 straight. He's got 51 points in his past 27 games. And these rankings are for the rest of the season. I'm using McKinnon's injury history as a tiebreaker. He just always gets nicked up. And it hasn't happened this year, but it typically does. So that's why I break that tie and put McDavid number 1. Little bit of disrespect to Nathan MacKinnon, despite his amazing work. I have him in number 2. So higher than I had him at the start of the season, but not number 1.
I will say that the guy I'm facing this week, Mariano, he's got Nathan MacKinnon, and every week I try to acquire him, whether it's throwing Jordan Eberle at him or Colton Parayko, these superstar guys that should be able to get Nathan MacKinnon back in a trade. He keeps declining it. Would you suggest that he trades Nathan MacKinnon to me?
I would. I think you could get a crazy haul for Nathan MacKinnon. Like right now, imagine you can get Leon Draisaitl plus something else for Nathan MacKinnon. I think that's the type of deal you want to explore, because especially if Colorado keeps winning and they're in a comfortable playoff spot, what if they need to rest MacKinnon at one point down the stretch? He gets nicked up. They want him healthy for the playoffs. I can see that happening. It's kind of like in Evgeny Malkin's prime years. He always missed, 10 games, 12 games. They kept him fresh for the playoffs. I think MacKinnon is eventually going to settle into that type of existence.
All right, so Mariano, he ignored Leon Draisaitl. He said Jordan Eberle for Nathan MacKinnon straight up. Next pick here in the top 300, Jeremy Swayman of the Boston Bruins.
Yeah, I surprised myself ranking him this high. So again, my rankings as we record this are not finalized, but I have him in the vicinity of the top 5 goalies. And again, he's in that timeshare with Linus Ullmark, so it did surprise me that I have him this high, but I think he is the most reliable goalie in the NHL for rate stats. Right now, I think he's surpassed Ilya Sorokin for that unofficial title. In his career, he's been between a 921 and 914 every season, and even he's 921 right now, and he's been between a 914 and a 945 every season. He'll get those 25 to 30 wins. So yes, he's not going to be a 40-win guy because Ullmark plays too much. But if you just want someone to be really good every time he plays, then Jeremy Swayman is your guy.
Yes. The same guy, Mariano, has Swayman and Ullmark as his 2 goalies. And I kind of suggested he try that strategy. It's working very well for him. Conor Berard, not playing right now, broken jaw. I believe he still might be showing up at the All-Star game to at least be involved in some stuff. But what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, Conor Berard was a very tough player for me to rank. And I've been sort of moving him around. Maybe I'll just pull up my rankings just so I can give you a sense. Again, these are incomplete at this time. But for someone who's dealing with that broken jaw, we don't know the exact timeline. I have him currently sandwiched in between Cole Caulfield and Drake Batherson. So that's still a pretty high rating for a guy who's injured and not necessarily that close to returning yet. But I still love what we saw from him in that roughly half a season he played. He was at better than a 30-goal pace, close to a 70-point pace, shooting the puck a ton. And who knows, maybe this little rest won't be the worst thing for him. He comes back shot out of a cannon and confident. I don't expect him to be tentative going forward. He's such a competitor. He's strong as a bull. So I do think he'll be the best rookie going forward once he comes back. And I've kept his rating reasonably high because of that.
Yep, I agree with that. I have him. I'm holding on to him as a keeper, but I really would love to drop him because he's like my worst player I have, basically, which is a great situation to be in when Conor Bedard's your worst player, because that will not be the case for very long. But we like to. I was a little bit evil when I put together how our pool was going to be, and being a minus player really hurts you. Unfortunately, Bedard is a very heavy minus player playing on the Chicago Blackhawks, so that happens. All right, Evan Bouchard of the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah, Evan Bouchard. So as of now, I have him as a top 3 fantasy defenseman for the rest of the season. And going in, the hype for him was pretty high. I think he's met those expectations in every way from a fantasy perspective. He is that point per game stud, give or take roughly a point per game, power play points, part of this rolling Oilers offense. And really, it's like, okay, Cale Makar, Quinn Hughes, who's the next defenseman that you take over Evan Bouchard for the rest of this season? I don't know if there's another one. Before the season, I would have said Rasmus Dahlin or Amir Heiskanen, maybe Dougie Hamilton. It goes on and on. But right now, Bouchard, to me, even ahead of Adam Fox, I have him as the number 3 fantasy defenseman, and I feel pretty confident about that.
Okay. And to wrap this up, a guy you just wrote about on dailyfaceoff.com, you should definitely be taking a look at that, and that is Nashville Predators goalie, for now, Juuse Saros.
Yes. So this has not been Saros' best year, and I know this as a Saros owner. It's been probably his worst season as a starter. He's been fighting just to stay at the 900 mark in terms of save percentage, but we know that he's capable of going on these otherworldly runs, and he often does so in the second half, so I'm not too worried about him even in the present. But the main reason why I have him ranked fairly generously, still comfortably in the top 10 among my goalies, is I still think it's possible he gets traded. I know that Barry Trotz told Daily Faceoff's own Frank Saravalli a few months ago that Saros is not available, but things can change. And Yaroslav Askarov is playing so well in the AHL, as we've discussed on this show already. He's kind of forcing the issue, and it might be time to hand him the keys, and you can just get a real haul if you make Saros available. There are some teams that are real contenders that really need help in net. I'm looking at someone like the Carolina Hurricanes. If the Devils can get back in the hunt, he's a possibility. Saros has that extra year left on his deal. So the reason why I'm very bullish on Saros, 1, he's still a great goalie, but 2, he could land himself in a really exciting fantasy situation before the season's up, and he could be a real difference maker in your fantasy playoffs. So he's someone to watch very carefully.
Now, goalies are very rarely traded at the trade deadline. Like, what was the last impact one? Ryan Miller, maybe? And that was like 10-ish years ago. Do you think he's traded?
I think that there will be some inquiries made. I predict he gets traded in the summer. Because again, there's not necessarily urgency. And then if you trade him in the summer, teams can already have an extension baked into it. He'll be eligible to sign one July 1st. But it's not unheard of. We saw Joonas Korpisalo was traded at the deadline last year, and that was a pretty significant deal. He went in to join a contender as a starter. So that was kind of a throwback. And he played very well for a while. He sort of fell apart in the playoffs, but he was great down the stretch. So we've seen it happen. And the Kings are a team that I wonder, are they willing to not cash out, but sort of relegate Cam Talbot to backup status? He's been playing much worse lately. Maybe he's feeling wear and tear. So I think Saros would be a good fit there as well. So we'll see. That's someone to watch really carefully.
I will say that when we did our midseason voting for Daily Faceoff, I put Cam Talbot as my 3rd goalie. And at the time, it looked like that was still going to be possible. It was a little bit early in his like downslope stretch, but I don't know. Why did I believe in Cam Talbot? I've been burned so many times by thinking that it's going to make sense.
Well, it's almost as if a 36-year-old goalie needed to play less, and now the Kings are paying for it. He's lost all 8 of his games, I think it is, in January, and his save percentage is like .863 or something like that. So yeah, he's turning into a pumpkin real fast.
I will point out that for Jonathan Quick, he has 6 losses between regulation and because he's 38, 6 losses between regulation and overtime, and 5 of them have come in the last, I think, 7 games. So again, showing that maybe using these old graybeard goalies is not necessarily a path to success at this point. Let's change the topic a bit. Your best bet, what is it today?
Yeah, this is a gutsy one, but those are the funnest types of bets. The New Jersey Devils, their current playoff odds are 20.1%, and they are a plus 2,400 Stanley Cup futures bet. And I kind of like it. To me, they have a couple games in hand. They're 6 points out of a playoff spot. But this team, even though they're more likely to miss the playoffs, I think that if they can get in on the final day, they can absolutely be the Florida Panthers of this year. We know how much talent they have. Jack Hughes will be back eventually. Jonas Siegenthaler will be back. You got Timo Meier coming back already. Dougie Hamilton, if they can survive, maybe one round of the playoffs, could be back. So you get your top pair back. And if they get a goalie, if they go and Tom Fitzgerald finally finds that netminder that they need, whether it's Saros, whether it's Marc-Andre Fleury, if he's healthy enough, James Reimer, whoever it's going to be, you upgrade in net, you get healthy in time, You creep into the playoffs on the final day, and suddenly the Devils are a nightmare matchup. If you're the top seed, your reward is to face a team that gets healthy at the right time and is stacked. Reminds me a lot of what we saw from the Florida Panthers last year. So put that all together, and I like the Devils as a long shot pick to go all the way if they can just get their foot in the door. We saw Florida almost did it last year, and New Jersey, to me, has a very similar makeup.
You had Saros to the Devils as one of the options. Yeah, I'm correct, right? Yeah. So, if you move in a guy like Seamus Casey, and I like Seamus Casey a lot, he'd be great for the Devils, but I feel like it would be worth it if that's part of the deal, because I think the thing to keep in mind with Saros is he's 28 years old. Like, he's not that old yet. Like, he's still got a bunch of good years where if this Devils team is really serious, like, that could be the piece you're missing and the piece that takes you all the way. So
exactly. And in the piece, the example I use for a trade with Seamus Casey and a first round pick is the sort of building blocks of that trade, basically repeating what they did for Timo Meier when they traded Shakir McDonough and the first round pick last year.
And that's worth it. 100% worth it to me.
Sure, it is. Even though Timo Meier's been terrible, he's going to figure it out. I'm not too worried.
All right. I guess that's it for best bet.
Okay. After I just was a chatterbox for a good 20 minutes, Steven, I want to turn the floor over to you. And you really sold me on this prospect, the Winnipeg Jets, this week when you did your weekly prospect roundup on Daily Faceoff. You just had a lot of great things to say about this kid. So tell me more about Rutger McGroarty.
He's good. That's it. All right, you want to talk now?
All right, end of podcast. See ya.
That's it. That's easy. I think I might be higher on Rutger McGroarty than a lot of people. I know I made the argument that they might not need to go and make another trade at the deadline. Like, Rutger McGroarty, if he turns pro, could be like this piece that gives him some extra scoring skill here for sure. And I was high on him in his draft year. I thought that maybe going, I think it was 14th overall. I thought that was almost a little too low, just given how much talent he has. And a couple weeks before the World Juniors, the big question was whether or not he was going to be able to play. He went back first into the boards, was in the hospital. It's like, this is not good for a guy who could be a physical threat, who can do all this stuff. Physical without being stupid. He only has 2 penalty minutes this year. He's taken 1 minor penalty all year long in the NCAA, but he's actually at 10 penalty minutes in the World Juniors. But he knows how to play at the edge. He plays with skill, with speed, with energy, all of that. He's not Conor Berard level, but he's still a top 15, top 20 prospect in the NHL right now. Having a great season in Michigan. He's driving so much of the offense. He's got 34 points in 19 games. He had 9 points in 7 games of the World Juniors. But just since returning from, and obviously this will change over the next little bit, he had a 3-point debut in his first game back with the University of Michigan, 2 points the night after, and then a pair of 4-point efforts against Michigan State. Now, the first game was a 7-1 win, but the second one was a 7-5 loss. Michigan State's a good team, so putting up 4 points against them twice is actually very notable, especially when you got a goalie like Trey Augustine in net. And he's continued to just put up points every single game he's played since he's come back. So he's playing some of the best hockey I've seen from him. I think the fact that he is willing to go anywhere on the ice, he could play with just about anybody. Like, you could throw him on there on the wing with like Cole Perfetti, and I feel like they're going to create a ton of damage. Or you put him on with Mark Scheifele, again, same thing. Like, he could play with anybody. He's proven that no matter who his center has been at any level, that he's just so dynamic, does a lot of the play driving himself. Winnipeg Jets have a very good one. I'm not sure, again, whether next year the answer is to have him play full season of pro hockey in the AHL or go to the NHL, but he could also, if Michigan, because University of Michigan's not looking like a favorite right now to win the national title, if they lose or if they come up short, does he go back and try to chase it next year when Michigan is another competitive team again? I'm not sure, but I think just the way that he's playing right now, I have no doubt that he'd be able to play in the NHL next year. And the Winnipeg Jets, have drafted some pretty good, solid players. They're never drafting early, but they're continuing to find these value picks between the 14th to 20th pick. And as long as you just keep doing that, it's going to pay off.
For sure. And to me, I wonder if he could have that sort of late impact like we saw with Matthew Knies coming into the Toronto Maple Leafs. In the playoffs, of course, Cale Makar did a few years back, Chris Kreider. There have been lots of different examples. And McGroarty, to me, I'm excited because he just has the most pirate-sounding name in hockey. Yeah, Rutger McGroarty, Jack Sparrow, it's me. Like, he's just a pirate. Come on.
It's funny. You're not the first person to say that, but look at some of the guys that he's played with in recent years. Cutter Gauthier, Jimmy Snuggerud, Logan Cooley, Redmond Savage or Red Savage. These Luke Mittelstadt. He's playing with some guys with some great names.
That's true. Fair enough.
So I think that just means it's perfect success. But the thing to kind of add on to the late season college thing coming up and being very impactful, it's like with Matthew Nyes last year, he looked a lot better in his first few NHL games than I'd argue most of this season. And that's because you're compared to everybody else who's played 60, 70 games at that point. Like he played like 30.
That's right. And you're also jacked because you can work out like crazy when you're in college. You're only playing like on the weekend and you can just pump iron.
You played 2 games, and some of these top teams are also playing against some pretty weak competition where University of Michigan go out there and win a game 9-0, and Matthew Nyes didn't have to do anything. So a guy like that, like a situation like that is very valuable, which is why I'm thinking like if he turns pro, like that could be someone you could throw in the middle 6 immediately and go and produce because he's been on this hot streak this year, this great momentum, and he doesn't play a ton of games. And he missed some games too to make it even on a smaller workload. So yeah, that playing the World Juniors definitely adds to that. But I think a guy like that could come in and thrive. So I guess you just can't really knock a situation like that. But that's it for talk about Rutger McGroarty. Do you want to do some questions now?
Let's do some questions. I'm ready.
All right. Sean Clifton asks, do you have faith in Samuel Ersson being Philadelphia's long-term starter? And I picked him up in one of my pools, and he's going to be a key part of my next Calder update. But what is your thoughts on Samuel Ersson?
Yeah, it's a great question from Sean here because, of course, it's pressing with Carter Hart taking a leave of absence. We have the Hockey Canada investigation looming at the time of recording this. Hart is not being unveiled as one of the players who has surrendered to police, but it's looking like a very strong possibility. So either way, it's very likely we don't see Carter Hart again, at least this season. So yes, there is a huge vacancy in that Philadelphia Flyers crease. Is Ersson going to be the one to seize it? I'm not too convinced. He is an undersized goaltender, 6'2", and he has not been dominant at any level he's played in the pros. Look through his career, whether he's playing in the AHL, playing back in Sweden, other than playing at the junior level, just playing in the SHL, it's not like he was the stud anywhere. He's been just fine, and he's sort of just found his way to the NHL through a series of, I don't want to say fortunate, he's earned his way, but I wouldn't say he's done so by just running laps around the league. I haven't seen it. And to me, he's got this big opportunity. He's been thrust into more duty, and he's already showing signs of wilting. 826 save percentage in his last 5 outings. So that's not exactly the message you want to send when you get this huge opportunity. So overall, I'm not super confident that he's going to be the guy long term.
Yeah, I'm also not confident in Cal Peterson either. But when you look at some of the other goalies in the system, they got Carson Bjarnason, who's pretty solid, likely going to be battling for Canada's starting position next year at the juniors. Alexei Kolosov out of Belarus is pretty good. Igor Zavrgin's good. Felix Sandstrom's got some, let's see what happens there. A little older, though, at this point. But, I think the one loss there was Ivan Fedotov and everything that's the whole kidnapping thing there, but that's a story for a different day. This question comes from Jeff Goodman. Corey Perry in Edmonton is interesting. What type of production are you expecting?
Yeah, again, this is a really relevant question. Of course, everybody's going to want to know this when you drop someone into basically the fantasy hockey version of the greatest show on turf. It feels like anybody who touches it is going to be fantasy relevant, but I wouldn't hold my breath. Corey Perry has mostly been playing on very good teams in recent years, Tampa Bay, Dallas before that, and he has not even hit the 20-goal mark in 8 years. He is 39 years old this spring. I do think he's going to get a look at some point. I'm sure there'll be a little line juggling where he suddenly gets thrown into the top 6, gets a look on the power play. Everybody will go crazy, rush to the wire. Oh, Corey Perry has 4 points in his last 3 games. I feel like that will happen. But just based on his age, I don't think it's going to be sustainable. So I wouldn't hold my breath. If I were you, if he's available, I'd pick him up. And then if he has a good game, I would try to capitalize on the hype and trade him immediately.
Yep, 100% there. He is, dailyfaceoff.com does have him as playing on the second power play unit, but he is on the third line. And you look at that and the way the Oilers are rolling, they're not going to really change the lines too much if they don't have to at this point. So it almost feels like he's got to overcompensate in the short term if he's going to get a lot of ice time. I think that's how I'm looking at it. In Chicago, it was easy to be more of a star player when, they don't have anyone to play with. But the Oilers, Zach Hyman's having a great year. Warren Fogel's looking pretty good. Yeah, he outbeat Connor Brown, but Connor Brown still has 0 goals, so that's not too hard to do. I don't think this is the same thing as when they brought in Evander Kane, where Evander Kane came in and immediately was a star. He was in the height of his career as opposed to being at the end of his career.
Yeah, that's the key difference. It's no knock on Corey Perry. It's just he's 39 years old. That's the age at which most players are retired. Not everybody can be Joe Pavelski. Perry's been still serviceable, but I don't think he's suddenly going to become a star. And again, just Tampa Bay is the best example. That team had so many elite players. They won 2 Stanley Cups, and he was with so many of the players who were on the winning teams, even though he joined after the fact. And it's not like he lit it up just playing on that team, right? So I expect it to be similar with the Oilers. Steven, let's finish the starting lineup now. Finish the show with the starting lineup. And we're going to do a callback to one we did fairly recently where I made my really weird, probably lame music festival. I think you're much more of a music guy than I am, or at least you're much more established and confident in your specific tastes. So I want you to give me your imaginary music festival. I assume that the bands will sound like this. So I'm going to guess that it's going to be 6 different bands who do that, but I'll give you a chance to prove me wrong.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off with probably the heaviest of all the bands on my list, Lorna Shore. And if you don't know anything about them, their singer Will Ramos can sound like an absolute demon. He can be totally terrifying. He makes this pig noise that is actually pretty crazy. He's probably one of the best metal vocalists around. Like actually, like Harvard researchers have been like trying to like understand his voice and his range, and it's like unbelievable what he's able to do. And I believe almost every song he records he does in one take because he wants it to be as accurate to the live show as possible, but it's unbelievable. So if you're a metal fan, you haven't listened to Lorna Shore, I don't know what you're doing. So they're going to terrify the whole crowd right off the bat. Before then, bringing in Dragon Force. You guys might remember their great song Through the Fire and Flames from Guitar Hero 3. They are still one of my favorite bands. I've seen them live twice. Unbelievable live show. And they kind of really play into the video game side of things. Like they have giant arcade machines. So they have like this great show. They're incredible musicians. Like Herman Lee and Sam Trotman are 2 of the best guitar players you're going to find out there. The bass work's amazing. The drum work's amazing. The vocal work by Mark Hudson is incredible. Not a huge mainstream band because they're a power metal band that sings about dragons and things like that. Not overly popular, but they put on a show, and that's the point. So after being terrified from the first band, everyone's going to be dancing to, a band that plays at the fastest beats per minute you're going to find of any band. So big fan of Dragon Force. I'm going to slow it down a bit, but one of my favorite live acts will go up next, and that is Billy Talent. I've seen them, I think, 7 or 8 times. I actually got to go backstage with them once, where a friend of mine knew someone in the band, and I got to talk to the band as well as members of Alexis on Fire, and we got to talk about the NHL trade deadline. I want to say this was the Kevin Shattenkirk year, and we're talking about. They were like, "Oh, is Kevin Shattenkirk going to the Leafs?" And it's like, I don't know. It sounds like I don't know if that's the right decision for them. And we literally talked about like the trade deadline for like an hour afterwards. It was awesome. But again, just a great band that performs live. Every show has been good. They don't put a whole ton of music out these days, but even for the hockey fans there, you remember "Turn Your Back" from NHL 9. You'll remember. Red Flag from NHL 6, one of the best video game songs you're going to find. So there's that. Then I'm going with Slipknot because, again, another band with great performance. Now, they're slowing down. They're in their 50s now, and they seem to be firing band members more often than not. But 9 band members with masks yelling at you with a huge sound. You got 3 drummers. You've got it's a great show. If you get a chance to see Slipknot, you probably won't have a lot more opportunity to do it, but I recommend it. Corey Taylor's still doing an unbelievable job. They know how to run a crowd. There's a reason they headline festivals. Number 2, we're going to put the guitars away. It's going to be Eminem because Eminem, again, knows how to hype up a crowd.
Oh, what a zag. I didn't see that one coming.
Very different. I feel bad for him. I'm not a football fan, but he was really looking forward to seeing the Detroit Lions because the difference between him and Taylor Swift is there would be a better chance of Eminem actually being at the Super Bowl. But when it comes to him, it's like people love him. Every time he does a show, it's a big deal. And he's one of the few guys kind of outside of the rock and metal I'll listen to. But part of it is because he's kind of, he's more of an aggressive rapper, more aggressive on that. He likes rock music. He likes things like that. And you can tell how he incorporates that, especially in his more recent albums. But number 1, I think a band that a lot of people have seen on TV recently, Green Day, my favorite band. They continue to just do some great stuff. They had a couple of pretty not great albums in a row, but their newest one, Saviors, I'd say is probably the best album they've done since 21st Century Breakdown. They played at the Grey Cup. They played in the the Dick Clark's New Year's Eve thing. They've been doing a bunch of stuff. They're fun. I'm looking forward to their tour because they're playing all of Dookie and all of American Idiot and then some other songs. It's going to be like 2 to 3 hour concert, probably closer to 3 hour concerts. I'm looking forward to that. I'm driving to Michigan to see that because they play in Toronto at the same time of the Hlinka Gretzky Cup. So I want to watch that too. So that's my concert. You've got some more, pop punk band, you got a rapper, you've got a new metal favorite, you've got a power metal band, and you've got one of the best deathcore bands in the world right now.
Okay. I like this show. I think that I would enjoy it. I think I would go to it. I think the key hurdle for you is just that first act. If you scare too many people away, is that going to, if people think that that's going to be the whole show, if they're terrified right off the bat, do you need to put that act a little deeper in the show so that you have people won over? That's the only question I have for you. But other than that, I really like the lineup.
Maybe Eminem's got to go to watch a football game so he can go first to just kind of just get out of there quicker. Maybe we have to do that. We'll see. But my other idea was potentially Dragon Force just to get the crowd pumping because they're fast, they're energetic, they got a party style sound despite being, again, one of the fastest bands you'll find. So okay. I don't know. Maybe I just kind of went from smaller to bigger, I guess.
Yeah, but very well executed. I think it's excellent. And that will end this week's show, everybody. Just a note, we will not have a show next week. There isn't any actual fantasy relevant hockey being played between now and our next show. So we're going to take a 1 week break for the All-Star break, and then we'll come back. And in a couple weeks, we'll start helping you prepare for your fantasy hockey trade deadline. Thank you for watching and listening.